Welcome back. Let's continue to this now. U.S. President Donald Trump has tracked from his threat to impose 50% tariffs on imports from the European Union next month. He's restored the July 9 deadline to allow for talks between Washington and the 27-nation bloc to produce a deal. This after EU's Ursula von der Leyen told him on Sunday that the EU needed more time to come to an agreement. For more on this, let's now speak to Mikatekiso Kubayi, senior researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue, associated with Unisa and Research Fellow at the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation. Mikatekiso, very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. President Trump's second term as President of the United States has been described as a shift in geopolitics, and there's been a lot of back and forth, particularly on the tariff wars issue globally. How do you read what's happening now between Washington and the EU bloc and the implications, broadly speaking?
Okay, thank you so much, my sister, for the question, and thank you so much for having me. Just to begin with, saying that the relationship between Washington and Europe is very old. It's very strong. Europe is, is essentially the United States, biggest and most strongest ally in just about all things. The United States is a major market for European goods. It's a major, market, a major trading partner for the European Union. I think this relationship is going to, continue, in strength. It's going to continue to move, in a position, of strength. Certainly, they wouldn't want to turn against one another as allies, NATO allies, for starters, and so on. Not with this level of, mutual need, mutual benefit, in the relationship that they currently have. That's, just to begin with. Secondly, on the issue of, President Trump's tariff, matter, the United States is facing its own challenges, domestic. I mean, they have been deindustrializing for a long time. There's this, issue of financialization, that has, taken hold, of, many things, reality in the United States. And it's been, a problem. Jobs, have not been coming up, as fast, as they would have liked. Production, the real investment in the real economy has not been, to the levels, that economy actually needs. And now President Trump is trying to, change that, but he's trying to do it, in a manner that is, in many people's, view, crude, fashion, in a manner that, essentially punishes everybody else, for the United States' own, doings, in terms of internal domestic policy, and so on. Thirdly, he's trying to make all of these changes without necessarily correcting the things that went wrong domestically in the first place, that led to this deindustrialization. On the one hand, you would say, okay, fine, a president has to, get into office and do what's in the best interest of, his country, national interests of his country, and so on. But it's very difficult to reconcile, what he's currently doing now, and the backlash, that is, that the US has been facing, since, as being beneficial to national interest of the United States. It's difficult to reconcile that.
So these ongoing tariff deals also come on the back of that high-stakes meeting, of course, between Washington and Pretoria, and also under the backdrop of several months of the US-China trade war too, the nations, of course, finally declaring a pause, and are expected to meet soon, we are told. How should we read into concerns that this is, to an extent, a threat on global economic stability? Because also, just on the how unpredictable, US President Trump has become.
It's a challenge, my sister. I mean, imagine this. You presidents across the globe, right, of all countries across the globe, have to now, reconcile with the fact that at any given moment, the United States can elect in a president that can flip scripts at any moment. It means that every country across the globe has to now prepare, for the potential shock that may be the United States administration of whichever president, right? I mean, it changes things, in how, countries would now have to view the United States in terms of whether or not it is a stable trading partner, whether it is a stable political partner, and so on. It's a challenge. Among researchers, and academics, you're starting to hear things such as, self-reliance. Countries working on self-reliance and building, their own, networks, alternative markets, and so on and so forth. Basically, preparing themselves for a potential U.S. shock. If you like. No one is liking this. No one across the globe, is enjoying this thing that President Trump is doing. And it's extremely problematic. And yes, many, have been, citing, this as, perhaps, something that could, ignite, a global economic catastrophe.
And when we look at, just some of the industries in South Africa that are likely also to be affected, I mean, we hear, of course, of South Africa's vehicle exports being under extreme pressure. I mean, are there any opportunities we can find here with these challenges when South Africa also considers perhaps other new markets, or is it rather a tight spot that we're finding ourselves in?
Yeah. Well, it's important to discuss, and negotiate with the United States because it's a big market. It's a major market. However, South Africa had already begun, diversifying, that particular market. In fact, its exports, of automobile, products, have increased to the European Union, for instance, and exports to the United States had been on a decline, as well, slowing down in any event before the Trump administration came into being. So there are already some of these, processes, these shifts, if you like, going on. South Africa is certainly, like any other economy, would certainly be on, a continuous, cultivation of new markets. Every country has to do that as a matter of, general cause, statecraft. If you like, you have to consistently be doing that. Can't, always be relying, on only just this one bucket. You have to forever be looking at diversification as much as you possibly can and see what, possible advantages that you can, leverage, for your trading benefit. And so on, but that had already been, been happening. But being that as it, having said that, there is no doubt, that a discussion with the United States has to happen. You have to engage, and see where the two countries can find each other and settle, at something. But at the utmost, importance would be stability. You can't have an unpredictable, administration that at any given moment, can, decide to flip, a switch and, go a completely different direction and, leaving you on a ledge, like that. I mean, I don't think that any economy would favor something like that.
Absolutely. Mikateko, thank you so much for your thoughts and your time. Mikatekiso Kubayi, senior researcher at the Institute for Global Dialogue associated with Unisa. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that.